I'm so excited to welcome you for a very special in-person discussion. I think I know everyone, but for the purpose of the recording, we'll acknowledge my name's Christy Bolingbroke. I'm the Executive Artistic Director for the National Center for Choreography here in Akron, Ohio. You can applaud for NCCAkron. Yeah, that's right. We'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary this fall. This particular event, and to be able to share it with all of you here and those listening from home, this is one of our dancing labs. And dancing labs are built on the premise of rigorous play and positive failure. There is no product expected at the end of it. We, aspiring to reach our geographic expanse and goals, will pair together artists and bring them that we say, hey, I think you have some similar interests. I think you're trying to tackle some of the same problems. What if you had some time and space to exchange your working knowledge with each other? And this particular lab is about intergenerational exchange. It is something that is not just happening in the dance field, but in the workforce today. There's an estimated 5 generations of labor in today's workforce in the US. In this podcast alone for season 6, we will represent 7 generations of dance makers. For the first time ever, we have the privilege of aging. We have people making dances longer than they ever were before. We have people starting sooner and seeing what has been laid out as well for the people that came before them, that's now documented in a different way. That particularly in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, those trailblazers were making it up as they went along, and they couldn't Google an answer. And now today, they're still trailblazing as they're making dances in the 55 and better era of their time. And so we're very excited to welcome artists who've been having these conversations in a low residency, long distance, some of them, or maybe in their own hometowns. But before we do, I'm especially excited to welcome Mary Petroski from the Creative Aging Institute at the Akron Art Museum to help us set the tone a little bit and understand what is creative aging. Please, a round of applause for Mary.
Oh gosh, thank you, Christy, for calling me into this conversation.
Absolutely. You know, the Creative Aging Institute had a symposium in the fall of 2024.
We did.
And my colleague Nikisha Moore-Denson and I got to come and participate, and we're really inspired to hear, one, how we could name and actively fight ageism, to practice anti-ageism, but also the creativity that came up. And there was one thing that came up that we were like, oh my gosh, because there was such interest in, like, here's weaving by an 80-year-old, here's painting, here's music making. And then the term that kept coming up was, and creative expression through movement. And we were like, it's dance, just call it, say the word. And so that was one part of the reason that I was like, you gotta come over to the dance side. We want to talk more about that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. What is the Creative Aging Institute?
Well, I'm just going to stop right there. I am so gratified to hear you say, I mean, we really, as a team over at the Akron Art Museum, put so much work into the summit. And, you know, you feel so passionately about it and you work so hard. And then to hear you say that it really made real life impact on you is so gratifying. So I do thank you for that.
It's just like making a dance. You hope people will show up and get it.
Well, exactly. I mean, and we are focused on the visual arts. We are staying in our lane over at the Akron Art Museum. And isn't it amazing that there are so many parallels? Visual arts and dance are maybe both languages where, you know, if words fail you, you might have, you know, a better outcome if you try to, you know, use movement, use dance, use a visual medium. But how do you do that if you have never been, creative or told that you are creative or supported in your creativity? And that is what the Creative Aging Institute at the Akron Art Museum is. It's solely a space where we are going to support creativity in folks who are 55 and better. We are going to be adventurous. We are going to help people continue to express themselves and evolve, because the people that I work with are living proof that there's no expiration date for your creativity. April 16th, I can't be creative anymore, I guess I better go home. No.
Creativity doesn't have an age limit.
There's no limit to it, and I get to be that person that holds space for people as they experiment. Maybe they've never cast aluminum to create a sculpture. Maybe they never thought of themselves who might be the person to create a graffiti street art piece. And those are all workshops that we have been able to host for our participants in Summit County and beyond.
I think what especially resonated with me in the summit as well was not just seeing the creativity knows no age, but also understanding how closely ageism and ableism can be quite intertwined. And that's where I felt that dance brings a sort of special hyper awareness of that, right? We're speaking from the body first and foremost. And, maybe we're from when you're told like, oh, you've got a great arch, you should do this kind of dance, or you're super flexible. And then you're also told and compared to each other. And so I'm really fascinated by that. But to your point, if we have generations of, I'll say, dance civilians, maybe people who haven't been able to practice dance, their parents didn't even let them, or maybe they, haven't studied a dance class since they were kids, and then you're out of habit when you get to be 55, 65, 75.
Right.
You're that much further removed from your body.
And if you are living out that self-imposed ageism, no, I did that 30 years ago, I can't do that now. Yeah, it has real life repercussions.
How did you find your way in getting to do this work?
So I have been working in senior housing and senior living for many years. I have an art background, a communication design background, and art history background. So when I saw this opportunity at the Akron Art Museum, I thought, this is me. I'm going to be able to blend these two areas, and it's just been amazing. The Art Museum received a grant in 2023 that was specifically for creating these opportunities for folks, because obviously the museum is a place for everyone, and we want to keep underlining that and stressing that, but
they might not feel welcome.
Exactly. What if you say like, oh, I used to take my kids there, but my kids are grown, or whatever you might say. You might say, oh, I used to know the artist, but now I don't even know the artist. Isn't it always wonderful when someone specifically hands you an invitation? You are the person we want to have here. And so maybe we've made some assumptions in the past, but we have offered out that invitation. Folks 55 and better, this is specifically for you.
And so what have you learned so far? You've been running it for a couple of years now. I know we had a conversation about unlearning some habits, particularly the stigma that's associated with aging and ableism, and that being raised inside of it too. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
Well, I just made a decision at the beginning. you try to think, how am I going to market this? How am I going to communicate this opportunity for folks? And you look for images, to put in the marketing, and oh my gosh, I said, we're not using this kind of marketing. Who would want to come to this workshop? It looks so boring. There is no one at any age that wants to do something that's boring. You want to explore, you want to evolve, you want to keep on going forward no matter where you are in your life, right? But I guess that has not been obvious. And so I just said, we're going to adventure just as we would adventure with any other demographic that we want to invite into the museum. Are you going to tell me that somebody who's 65 years old isn't angry about something that's going on in the world and doesn't maybe want to make a mural and do it out on the street? No, I don't believe that. I think we are all trying to go forward every day, no matter where we are in the journey.
It is a part of the unlearning. The statement that also stuck with me from the plenary speaker, Ashton Applewhite, just to give her a shout out too.
Yes.
Was that aging is the one thing we have in common, regardless of how many years young you are. We're all actively aging right now.
Right.
And I don't think that we think about that in that way. And
it sneaks up on you.
The reframe that you're talking about is like, oh, we have to change what the front is and change our assumptions about why people would want to engage or to step up.
Kind of hearkening back to what you said a few moments ago, it made me think of an artist in our collection, Alma Thomas. Alma Thomas was an art teacher for many, many years. In her 70s, when she got to retire, her life became all about her art practice. And so, to your point about reframing, what is retirement? Maybe we're thinking about it in the wrong way. Maybe retirement is a time where, wow, this is a time of, some luxury for us, luxury of time. We're maybe not raising children. We may, have some funds to spend and some time to spend on ourselves. And she is an amazing example of that, in that her paintings are very large scale. And not to say that you might not evolve your practice, but she did not. She created apparatus because she had severe arthritis. But she said, well, there's going to be some way I'm going to have to keep on doing these large-scale paintings. So she created ways to keep on moving forward in the way that she wanted to. And she's just such an inspiration for me. So one thing I would love for everybody to do is come to the Akron Art Museum and look around for artists who are working and have a flourishing art career in that 55 and better demographic. It's fun.
Amazing. And I appreciate the reminder that it's a constant evolution or becoming, and we're going to get to hear from more artists who have continued to evolve through the dance field. How about a round of applause for Mary? I would like to do a brief choreographic transition and invite our visiting artists to come up, and I'll have them introduce themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
And Mary, if you want to come around so that you're not over there alone.
I would love to.
She was respecting the assigned seating. I'm a rule follower. I mean, this alone is an embarrassment of riches. I love when we get to bring so many artists together, and you may or may not be familiar with everyone who is up here. So we have three duos of choreographers. One, usually in each partner there's a 55 and better who we had curated, and then we worked with each of them to identify who would they be interested to speak with. This was not by design a mentor-mentee relationship, but one of reciprocity, something that they could sort of dig into the issues since they are all working artists today. I would love to start by, I've invited each of them to introduce their work, and if you could start with your name, so we can also identify your voice for our listening friends. Tiffany, would you like to grab the microphone and you can start?
Thank you so much, Christy. So my name is Tiffany Rea-Fisher. I am a choreographer based in Harlem, New York. I also spend half of my time in the Adirondack Park, which is the northern part of New York State, as the director of the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. We were asked to kind of give some highlights, and I want to say I've been very blessed within my career that I had a hard time kind of narrowing it down, but if I start backwards, I want to be very clear that this moment is one of the highlights. Because I found out just randomly, I got an email that Dianne McIntyre knew who I was. And I freaked out. I really freaked out. I called my mom, I was like, oh my God. I was in the middle of my own performance and had to excuse myself. I lost it, which was just so wonderful. I had been a fan of Diane's for some time. So to know that she knew me, and more so than that, was inviting me to this opportunity was really fantastic. I think earlier in my career, I was on a mixed bill. We were touring Europe, and I was on a mixed bill in Luxembourg, and the Duke and Duchess of Luxembourg were there. And they asked specifically of who the choreographer of this one piece was, and I got to go back and I got a tutorial on how to bow and how to not make eye contact and things like that with them. But that was the first time that I was oh, okay, I had heard tale of things like this happening, but
that's a real high level talk back after a show.
It was really truly incredible. A couple of years ago, I got to create a ballet for Dance Theater of Harlem, and I am a modern dance choreographer who really is always, I've taken ballet, I did point, I did all of it, but I knew that wasn't my calling. But to be asked by Virginia Johnson to come into her space was such a gift, and it was a 6-week moment that, because of COVID, turned into a 3-year moment. And I got to premiere that piece, and then recently I have my season is coming up at the end of May, and I'm starting to think about my choreography different, and I'm starting to think of the longevity of it and how to create for a cast that maybe is going to learn this 10, 15, 20 years from now. And that's just a new thought. So I'm excited to go on that journey of what dance making for me looks like as I think about the preservation. And I think and I'm a mom of a beautiful little girl, Kaya. So that's
all the highlights.
All the highlights. Yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you.
Kristel, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Kristel Baldoz. I am based in Queens, in New York. So there's Tiffany. And I am from Delano, California. So I'm from near Bakersfield. And I think that's an important fact because it does establish why I make work. I'm a daughter of immigrants from Philippines, and my father worked in the fields picking grapes, and I think that action that I've learned from a very young age was what has haunted me and my artistic practice, this repetitive, monotonous movement that I'm kind of obsessed with. And it is something that really informs the work that I do now artistically, even though it's not about the Philippines or Delano or the fields. And I am really interested, I'm a multidisciplinary artist, so I work across dance, performance, and ceramics, which is also something that I do in my performances. Those practices inform my dances, where I usually make arrangements. What I like to say is arrangements between bodies and objects. And one of the pieces that I think is a great example of that is a piece I created during my Fresh Tracks residency with New York Live Arts. It's called Yellow Fever, and I made a ceramic wig that I wear at one point, and I'm thinking about how objects have personhood and how people are seen as objects at the same time, and what does that look like through this hyper-identification of the blending of these identities. And I'm wondering if that's it. I think
We'll get
that's it
some
for
more.
now.
Okay. Nia-Amina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nia-Amina Minor, born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and I am based in Seattle, Washington now. I'm a movement artist, a choreographer, curator. I do a little bit of art writing, I do a little bit of dramaturgy, I do a little bit of a lot of things, a teacher. And I think that is a highlight right now for me, is that I'm able to kind of spread all of the things that interest me into all of these different pockets. What I'm excited about moving forward is to find spaces or a space where I can show up as wholly myself and bring all these things in. But for now, a highlight is that I'm able to sustain myself by doing all of these things. I also have an extensive performance career. So a highlight was dancing with Spectrum Dance Theater under the direction of Donald Byrd, and then moving on and working independently with amazing artists. And I think largely the focus on collaboration has been a seed that is definitely starting to blossom. Looking for spaces where I can come together or bring folks together to develop a sense of collective visioning around movement practice and around choreography and around multidisciplinary arts. So I was able to do that maybe a year ago with a project called A Practice of Return. And that was a practice, developing a practice through collective visioning around returning to something in history in order to create new responses to it now. Sort of looking for the gaps in the archive and responding to those gaps, if not to bring more fullness to them, maybe add more flavor, not to reenact or recreate, but only to see what we can see and move forward. So I like to think of time in this sort of non-linear, circular, multidimensional way, and that's certainly been a highlight. There's so much. I think another highlight obviously is being here and also learning about all these intersections in folks' histories and careers. Mm-hmm. I continue to be surprised when I walk into a room of artists and know that we're all maybe 0.5 degrees of separation away from each other. All it takes is one conversation, one name, and then the cascading of information comes out. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Mr. Byrd, I invite you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Donald Byrd. I am a choreographer and a director, and I live in Seattle, Washington, and I'm the artistic director of Spectrum Dance Theater. So it's a highlight that we are looking for?
Sure.
Okay.
How do you choose?
However I choose. I mean, as I was listening, the age thing. So I'm over 7 decades old.
Okay.
And so I have a lot of highlights.
That's what I mean. How do you choose?
How do you choose? How do you choose? How do I choose? I mean, I could say I'd choose not to choose because it's all been really wonderful in some ways. It's been also tragic, and even those are highlights as well. I think maybe what I'm after is that the highlight is actually happens on a daily basis, that how present I am to my life on a daily basis. So at any moment, that's the highlight. So it's kind of like what people would ask me in the past, what's your favorite dance? And it would always, what's the favorite dance you ever choreographed? It's always whatever I'm doing at the moment, that's my favorite. So it's kind of like that with the highlights. I would say that the highlight is wherever I am whatever is happening in my life that day that has my attention, that's the highlight.
Can we also take a public moment? We happen to be recording this the day after you were named a Guggenheim Fellow. How about a round of applause? I'm just gonna say, we didn't get to give you your flowers yet.
Thank you.
Yes.
Long time coming.
Long time coming.
Yes, yes. Donna, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, my name is Donna Uchizono, and I ask if you were to dedicate a dance to someone, who would that person be? And I will say probably my highlights in my life are that I'm still doing this in this continued body. I have a couple of pieces that people really love, and we just did one of them. And I was very humbled by the response. I mean, it was kind of amazing. Some people came 3 times to see it.
This was part of the Dance Space
Yes,
Project 50th
yes.
anniversary.
And let's see, I think I was born in a U.S. Army base. I'm raised in California. Someone asked me if I'm, what generation I am. I'm 3rd generation Japanese American. And I think that when I think about highlights, just being recognized for what I do is such a highlight. And then also being recognized, like, here I was a dancer with no turnout, and Mikhail Baryshnikov asked me to make a piece on him, and then I was able to do something for Oliver Sacks's, I think it was his 60th birthday, and I got to work with David Hammonds, and so but I think the highlight is actually all of the dancers that I've worked with, because I think they are the giantesses and giants of our world, and that's quite a highlight. I am known for making set work since 2016. I also have a thing what I call dedication practice, and it's been developing a pedagogy around it, and it's in one of its form is I ask if you were to dedicate a dance to someone, who would that person be? We go and talk for maybe about 10 minutes. You maybe pick a song that you would like played, and then I create a dance on the spot for that person that you would like to dedicate a dance to. I don't know what music is going to be played because you tell the person. And so that's something that is another highlight that I have been really excited about.
So beautiful, and like an accumulation of experiences and interactions.
Right.
You can see why I'm like an embarrassment of riches, and we're not done yet. Miss Dianne, would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Dianne McIntyre, originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Lived many, many years in New York City with my dance company and dance studio, Sounds in Motion. And I live here in Cleveland, and I've been here since 2003. I want to go back first to say, in Cleveland, I had a lot of nurturing in my dance classes. Elaine Gibbs Redmond, also Virginia Dryansky, and I also was a scholarship student with the Cleveland Modern Dance Association from when I was maybe 11 years old. And I got to take classes and see performances by our major dance figures, modern dance figures, Cleveland Modern Dance Association. Okay, major modern dance. So I had a lot of nurturing here in Cleveland. So it's been a joy being back in this area, even though I do work on companies and my own work in various parts of the USA and abroad. What I want to say is I'm known a lot for my collaborations with live music, and also people have been, very inspired by the fact that I use some improvisational elements within However, I have never explained to people that that's what I did. It just came out recently. So
Secret's out.
The secret's out. One thing I want to say about some highlights. I've had many highlights because I started choreographing when I was 7. But I had a couple. One was I worked in theater, been very fortunate to work in the professional theater world. So I created a piece called I Could Stop on a Dime and Get 10 Cents Change. This was a piece about my father, when you say dedicated. So I interviewed my father. He was a great storyteller. And then I created a dance drama where the people had to be able to speak and dance and sing. And we created this piece. Everybody spoke my father's words and did movement that I felt was inside of him. He was I spoke a long time.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Anyway,
Please finish telling us about it.
that was because my father became a hero. It was done in different parts of the country, and every place the people applauded him. He said, you made a piece about me. I didn't even do anything. I said, yes, you are a hero because you are just like the people around this country that work very hard to make sure their family has everything they need and also the community has everything. That's you, Daddy. You are a hero. And he became a hero in Cleveland. He was on TV. They did interviews with him and all. That made my heart just fly. That's a little about me.
All of you sharing not only your personal histories and stories, but I'm also struck, you remind me that dance can do so many things. Dance can be a means of processing the world that we live in. It can be a personal love letter. It can also lift up people and amplify ideas. And I'm really curious to hear some of the other things that you have discovered in your conversations, because most of this has been low residency this year. This is actually the first time this week that everyone has been in the same place physically. So I'd love to start with Tiffany and Dianne. As you've been exploring this, you kind of have discovered that you've been living somewhat the same life at different times. What does that mean? Yeah. Tell us more.
Okay, so Tiffany has established her dance company in Harlem. That's where I had my dance company many years ago. She also works with themes that have to do with the culture. Some of them have to do with culture of African American individuals, and not all. It's not all of what she does. That's like me too. Okay, and also she works in theater as well. So for me, hearing her, meeting with her for the first time and hearing her energy, and she's doing this and she's doing that, and we have to do this and we have to do that, and everything is my dancers and blah, and she's going here and she's going there. I'm like, whoa. So it wasn't just that technically she was doing some things like that I am still doing, but in the same location. But hearing her made me remember my energy at her age. I said, nothing would stop me.
It's a reminder of yourself.
Yes, nothing would stop me. That's what she's got.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
So that's why it's special.
It is.
Your turn.
And I think for me, it was this light bulb that came up, and that I didn't have to do this myself, that there was someone that had done this. There was a place that I could go to for answers. I think throughout my life, misunderstood a lot of times, because I saw things that I was like, no, that does connect to this, and this can be with that, and you can have your cake and eat it too, and grab off of someone else's plate. You can have all of these things, and I always felt like I was misunderstood until I had this conversation, and the clarity and the confidence that Miss Dianne gave me, of like, no, you got it. And when I look at what she's been able to do, I'm like, you can do it. This is not theory. It's already been done in practice, and it's been done beautifully with grace, you know? So that was very helpful. And anytime I feel kind of doubtful, or it's like, no, girl, let's go. You gotta, you can do it, you know? So that has been really helpful. And in our kind of like application essays, I had said that choreography can be really, can work in a silo, and it can be very lonely. It can be a very lonely place. So to know that someone has done this, and so now I have Miss Dianne in the studio with me on my shoulder. You know, even though I'm in New York and she's in Cleveland, I have her there, being able to like, you know, push it forward, knowing that this is not brand new. And in the best way, you're not special. You're in a continuum, which is really wonderful.
And vice versa, I think. Yeah.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Our very first conversation, we literally just talked about the block, because we also lived 2 blocks away from each other. Like,
Yeah.
so we were just talking about the new construction of Linda's. Like, it was such a wonderful, we walked, literally had the same like commute to our studio. I mean, it was really a very wild, it was wild how similar our lives were, our thought process were, and then the actual physical geography of where we were within not only New York, but Harlem in particular.
Yeah, it's the finding a new old friend from the neighborhood.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's amazing. Thank you. Kristel and Donna. Yes, right. You're not just here to listen. And I had acknowledged in my opening remarks that, you know, in the U.S. labor force, there's an estimated 5 generations in the workforce. People are living longer, people are working longer. I do think what Mary talked about, reframing what is retirement, which I don't even know, that's a separate podcast with, you know, artists going, what is retirement? Yeah. But in this podcast season alone, by the time that we drop it this summer, season 6 of Inside the Dancer's Studio will actually represent 7 generations of dance makers who are actively working today. And so I'm really curious what themes have emerged, because Kristel and Donna, you've each entered this field at different times. What have you noticed hearing from each other's perspectives? How is it the same? How is it different?
Well, I think, first of all, I want to really thank NCCAkron, because I have this very horrible and sad distinction of being the first and only American-born choreographer of Asian ancestry to have received cumulative national awards and recognition across the nation, rather than local areas, and also to have toured a dance company both nationally and internationally. And that spent me spinning into a deep depression for about a year. And as
This is a recent acknowledgement.
it kind of came out of this depression of what has been my experience of not having mentors like me. I also looked and saw that most of the funding and presentation of work, except for me, has been for Asian-born choreographers rather than American. And so I've been talking to many people behind the scenes, because I want all Asian choreographers to be funded, but I want more of a balanced and equitable distribution of the funding and presentation. So I asked NCCAkron if the people that we're looking at, if they could all be American-born Asian choreographers. And so I went into that with that. And so it has been just remarkable talking with Kristel. We don't feel so alone. And I think just we found both of us, our work isn't about our racial identity. I mean, and even though our identity will always be in there, there's no way of getting around that.
It's the body.
And so I think for me, the common thing was like talking about like expectations of who we are as choreographers and artists. And, you know, just the tired what I said in today, that tired of like, no, where are you really from? Seriously, where are you really from? I'm like, California? No, where are your parents from? California? So that idea of like the perpetual foreigner and in your own country. And so that was something that we talked about a lot. And, do we net pass?
Yes, I feel like with talking to Donna, it's funny because we started at a different time, but there's so many similarities in a way. Like Donna mentioning that there are no mentors for her to lead her choreographic, artistic career, and in some ways, like I kind of felt that until I talked to Donna. So thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity to be in conversation with Donna. And it was really refreshing because I didn't feel alone. I think it's sad that I still feel this way after, if Donna felt that way and then I still feel that way, but knowing that we're still kind of in this together and we're still figuring things out together is really, really refreshing. What's that?
The visual art is so.
Yeah, and also as my practice has integrated visual work, I try really hard to keep it separated, but somehow they come together, and it's a drag because I have to carry a lot of things with me. I was like, I just want to go into a space and dance, and I can't do that because this material is calling me. But the fact that Donna has a background is a performance artist, has this really rich knowledge around visual art, is something also uncannily amazing to be paired with her. In some ways, I was like, oh wow, like every time we talk, I'm just, oh my goodness, like thank you so much for also knowing about this or feeling this way. And I think to the point where Donna says this idea of the foreigner, I think this is the perpetual thing that we have in common that we're feeling similarly, is that it's the identity of the Asian American is a sort of sense of abjection, this casting off. So it's, as much as we try really hard, this has been part of our conversations, to work hard to do the work that we do, there is this insistent, foreigner perspective or abjection that is tied to the Asian American identity.
That's a whole other level, this idea that Mary introduced, that we were talking about, like what it is to evolve, as we think as aging is not like towards a final destination or a dead end, pun intended, but rather that you're constantly evolving and becoming. But it sounds like there are still some factors that never change, and yet you might have different tools or different perspective to weather them too.
The one thing I'll say is that I think one thing we have in common is just the persistence to keep doing what we do, though.
Yeah. Yes, all the choreographic tools. To hear from Donald and Nia-Amina, so you had a prior working relationship. Nia had performed with Spectrum. So I'm curious what has come up for each of you in this process, as far as like, where does the relationship go with a different invitation? Has it deepened? Has it expanded? How would you describe it?
How would I describe it? I think my relationship with Nia, and I'm grateful for this, to have this opportunity to kind of engage with Nia this way, because when you work with people, especially choreographers and dancers, that is a complex dynamic.
Yes.
And so when I first met Nia, when she took the last couple of days of my workshop in Seattle, and I was very taken by her how she approached the physicality. I could tell, or I thought I could tell, that there was a mind behind what she was doing. It wasn't just the body doing it or replicating it. It was something else going on that I was really drawn to. And there was a kind of independence that I really liked, and that I was, but also it unnerved me Because even though I think of myself as, I mean, I've been evolving, and but still the kind of classic choreographer dancer relationship, just do what I want you to do. You know, shut up and dance. And that,
You'll get your time too.
and that's impossible for her. And that's also what I appreciate about her, is that that's impossible for her. So I think I mentioned in one of our conversations that Nia, for me, would, if I got to choose the person who would succeed me at Spectrum, it would be Nia.
Oh, now it's
Wow.
Did I say that before?
No.
I mean, we've had a conversation, but now, right.
I mean,
That's great to hear.
yeah. But that's who I would choose, and I mean, for a lot of reasons, you know, for a lot of reasons. But I think so I think this process has been, in some ways, has been really terrific in terms of that I feel sure about that decision. I don't know if that's something that Nia wants.
You don't have to decide today. You're really gonna want to hear.
I think, I don't know what our conversations have been like, actually. You know, I think I'm just so used to talking to Nia, you know, so it's like, there is no moment where, okay, we're going to talk about this to talk about that. But I mean, for example, earlier this week, I said, oh, I have this project that I'm doing. I would like you to be involved with it. She goes, I don't have any time, you know. But I think that's how it is. I always am trying to find ways that I can involve Nia in the projects I'm doing, because I think I've had, over the course of my career, I've had various kinds of muses, and Nia is a kind of muse for me. And so, and it's not just her physicality as a muse, but her mind, her how she thinks of herself as a part of community is a lesson.
It sounds like we're hearing you talk about it. While there is a history in your relationship, it has not been a linear experience. And if anything, maybe in our brief lab relative to your longer relationship, you've been poking at a lot of different things, finding different ways. I'm curious to hear, Nia, how would you reflect on what this opportunity has sort of added to or contributed to your relationship with Donald?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely an evolution. I came to work with the company at an older age. I was 26, 27, so I was already, I had done work.
I mean, relative to what was normalized.
Yes.
Talk about ageism.
I think we
And you
know.
had a master's degree.
Yeah. I think we know. I mean, I should have said, it maybe in a different way, but I think we know. If you've seen Mr. Byrd's work, then you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, I was already doing the calculations because in my mind, I was thinking, well, my goal is to be, dancing into my 90s. My goal is, to be doing Carmen de la Bla. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's a way I need to pace myself and also make sure that I'm clear about, what I can do, what I can't do, my boundaries. And, so sometimes we would volley in the studio. He'd say something, I'd respond back, and then it'd go back and forth. And I think there was always a respect for my independence and my voice. And, I recognized that pretty immediately. But it was also a rigorous working relationship, which is something that I desired. So upon leaving, I expected it to continue, even though I wasn't working with the company anymore. In fact, I wanted it to become something different and to grow in healthy ways. Because I think the working relationship, whether you're working for somebody, working with someone, collaborations, that a lot can come up. You know what I'm saying? And so my one of my values is on maintaining relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think particularly in the world we're living in, how are you maintaining relationships through it all? Through a pandemic, through global crises, through internal individual crises. And so that was what I expected. I wouldn't call it the mentor-mentee relationship, but it's an important relationship inside the community of dance that I have. And I'd like to maintain those. I think also working with someone, on a short-term project or even in a company for a few years, when you leave that situation, sometimes relationships can fizzle. Not that you're not in connection, but the experience performing and working and creating is so deep that then when you leave that, it sometimes doesn't maintain the same, sort of intimacy. And so I expected it to continue. I'm like, I'm still in Seattle, so what's up? And like Donald said, he has this way of pulling me in, whether for conversation or just, come and watch this rehearsal. And those have always been welcome invitations. I was gonna say something else.
Well, I'll just offer, I love the hearing, a little bit more from your perspective. It's the reminder that it wasn't adding on to the relationship, but it was almost like, oh, well, here's a way we can experiment with how we could have a different relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is also a good reminder about how we cultivate those relationships, how we navigate, what we look for. It's not always a means to an end.
Right.
I'm not just looking for a collaborator. I'm not just looking for a dancer. We know so much more now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to take this opportunity to transition for a larger question and would love to hear from a couple of you. So we have, I'll say our 55 and better generation. I just like to remind people, the performing arts field is actually really young, right? The NEA was only established in the mid-1960s. And so if you were starting to make dances in the 70s and in the 80s, they couldn't Google for answers, all right? They were making it up as you went along. And I'm curious if having this longevity of a career and still making work today, is it what you thought it was? Donald.
I'd really like to say something about that. Because when I was first in New York, I was dancing in New York, and then I went to California with Gus's company, Gus Solomon Jr.'s company at Cal Arts. And then when I went back to New York was not what I left a couple of years before.
Even in that short time.
In that short amount of time. And what I'd say to people.
What were the years again?
It was 1976 I went to with Gus, 76, 77.
76,
And so there was no such thing as a career in dance. I didn't, if you wanted to dance, you danced, and then you had some job or something that you did, and so it was really about the dancing. If you're doing it, it's about your love and commitment to that. So I come back to New York, and then suddenly I hear people talking about careers in dance. What do you mean a career in dance? And then there's the Next Wave Festival, and then and it's just and it was just the world had changed. And so I think I asked you earlier about what is it, was it what you expected? What that meant, which what, and
because I would imagine if schools even do this anymore and they have a career day, how many dancers or choreographers are being invited to career day as a way forward? But it is, I appreciate the pushback on the question, because then to expand it, then we also have a generation of artists present in this lab who maybe have entered the field in the last 2 or 3 decades. You were able to Google some things. Maybe you had heard from other, mentors, faculty, teachers in schools about how hard it is, and yet you did this anyways. So is it what you thought this creative life would be?
I just want to.
Yeah. I'm just expanding it. We can go anywhere.
No, but I mean the idea that it's like we all knew it was hard, whatever, and we still did it anyway.
Yes.
And I think that's the important that something about a characteristic of dancers, of artists, is to do it anyway, even though you know it might be it is foolish. It's foolhardy at any rate.
I love that. It's a good reminder because I think sometimes we get pulled or distracted in the comparison of what our dance civilian friends, family members, and colleagues are doing or what their definition of success is. And so that's why I'm fascinated this, like, what is the goal and how do you sort of reconcile that? I don't know, does anyone else want to talk about navigating a creative life? Tiffany is a thought. Do you want to hand it to her first?
Yeah.
So I liked the challenge. In my bio, I describe myself as a positive disruptor. And I think disruption, it feels the same. You don't know until you're on the other side of it, whether it's negative or positive or neutral. But I like the idea. It was like something this beautiful, it can't be all bad. And what I was getting was like, you're never going to afford this, you're never going to, all of this negativity. And I was like, I don't believe that, because when we think of art, there's a lot of artists that do just fine for themselves. So like, it became then my goal to live the life that I envisioned for myself solely through my art. That became like, I'm going to do that. And I think that speaks a little bit to kind of my way of being. I use kind of joy and rigor as an act of resistance. And in places where it's like not built for me or meant for me or made for me to succeed, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it with joy, and it's going to be amazing. Like, and that's always kind of been my outlook on life. So I loved the challenge of something so difficult, so unlikely to happen, but I'm like, but it happened for them. Yeah, I saw it.
And
I
some
saw
of
it
the beauty is in that challenge and,
Yeah.
and the daily joy that you referenced too.
That's
Donna.
it. You have to be in love with the work. If you're not in love with the work, it's a wrap. Walk away immediately. But if you're in love with the work, it can be a joyous, beautiful thing, I think.
Did you want to add anything, Diane?
Yes, because I was from the era when you couldn't Google something.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying.
I could Google something. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I was choreographing from age 7, then I choreographed in high school, and then in the university is when I found out if I had a gift for choreography when I went to Ohio State, and they pushed me as a choreographer when I was at school. So then I moved to New York just really to get some more experience in dancing and watching choreography, but then I stayed there. What happened was that I had another mentor named Louise Roberts. She was the head of Clark Center for the Performing Arts. So I said, Louise, I've always choreographed. I did a short solo, which was just me the year before. I said, I want to do a group piece. I want to do a piece. I want to do a concert because I like choreographing for people. She said, well, put up a notice and, people will come to your audition. I said, but I'm brand new. They don't even know what I do. Why will they come? She said, because this was in 1972. She said, the people will come to your audition because they're hungry to dance. I said, okay. So I put up a notice and people came. She said, just be clear about it. Do they get any money? When's it going to be? So I did a piece at the Cabiculo. It was a small theater, mostly for theater and dance, 51st near 8th Avenue. So after I did the concert, somebody came up to me and said, wow, you can, and I shared it with somebody because I didn't have a whole evening. Somebody said, wow, you could actually start a company. You could be a company, and when you have a company, you could get money. You could write up grants, get money to pay people more. And I'm like, so I'll tell you what my experience was when I was a teenager, whatever. I saw pictures of Paul Taylor, other dance companies, dance choreo leaders. I said, I want to do that. The reason I went into it was because of I was naive. So I said, they said you could have your own, you could be a company and write grants and things. I said, well, somehow I looked in a telephone book or something. Somebody told me about a person with the Association of American Modern Dance Companies, a man named Adam Pinsker. I was very bold then. I called up Mr. Pinsker. I said, I want to talk to you about how do I create a dance company. So I had a meeting with him. He said, you do A, B, C, D.
Wow.
And you get a lawyer and he will incorporate you. And here's the name of the lawyer and da-da-da-da-da. And so I did that in just a couple of months. I had a 501c3.
Wow.
It was the fact that I couldn't go, I didn't know what it was gonna be. It was just like, yes, I just love the choreograph. I want to have a company. And the reason I picked Paul Taylor because he did very unique work, but had a big following. I wanted to do very unique work, push the envelope, but still people would come and see it. So that's what. So I didn't know ahead. It's gonna be like very, very, very hard.
Right.
So in my innocence, I started my company.
And I know in previous conversations that we've had, making your choreographic debut in 1972, you also made the decision to dissolve the company and then return to Cleveland, and you still make work today. And so it's the longer that you're in this field, you continue to sort of cycle and evolve. It's not a fixed idea. We were talking earlier today, for such an ephemeral art form, how could we do better to find some ephemeral practices that would support it instead of weighing us down, so we can continue to evolve.
Yeah.
This is just a taste for y'all. I feel so selfish closing this down now because I get to talk with these people more this week, but I want to be cognizant of time, and we will make space so then you can have more one-on-one conversations. But I would love to invite anyone who wants to share a little what's next, and I'm hoping, Ms. McIntyre, because by the time that this episode comes out, people could still come see your next performance in Northeast Ohio that was just announced earlier this week. Do you want to give a shout out for this fall?
Okay. November 15th, 2025, my work called In the Same Tongue will be presented by Dance Cleveland at the Ohio Theater. So I hope everybody will come out to it. So it's amazing dancers, amazing musicians, and there is some speaking of poetry by Ntozake Shange that's spoken by the dancers. And it's all about how dance and music communicate and how human beings communicate. Very uplifting and also not always uplifting.
And less than uplifting.
So, yes, thank you. That's my commercial.
Well, it's an amazing full circle, since you also gave an acknowledgement to scholarships from the Cleveland Modern Dance Association, which is also some of the earlier roots that now is maybe perhaps more publicly known as Dance Cleveland.
It's known now as Dance Cleveland, yes.
Other shout outs, what's next, things that people are excited about?
Yours is coming up.
My company, Emerge 125, is having a performance at the end of May at the El Museo del Barrio. It's our first time being back in Harlem after 6-year residency at the Flea Theater downtown. Then after that, I head for all of June and July to work with Classical Theater of Harlem. I'm their resident choreographer. And then off to the public, possibly for Pericles. We're figuring that out. So, yeah, and then deep rest, I think.
And then recovery. Yes. Any other excitement? What's next? Things that you can talk about?
Yes. I have Spectrum has a performance in mid-May, I think starting on the 14th of May, and it is called Localities and Odyssey, and it is a kind of, not a kind of, how I've been saying, it's a like the Odyssey, and I've kind of framed my life like that of Odysseus at the end of the Trojan War, and trying to get back home And so it is these localities, these places in my life that I've spent time or that have had an influence on me that manifests itself in the work that I do. So, and that was based on a memoir that I'm writing that's still unpublished because it's not completed. But the idea was to do like what was a piece that was the vibe of each of the localities. And so it really is because I'd done other versions of it before that had a lot of text in it. And so I was encouraged, I'll say it that way, to do it with movement. And so it's just it's a thematic dance concert, you know. That's all it is, really.
7 decades in, it's another dance concert.
So I'm excited about that.
Excellent. And Nia wants to say something.
Yeah, I'm coming off of a 2-week show that was a collaboration with Keys Wiley, and I'm moving into a production as a site-specific performance called Elysium, collaborating with Danny Terrell and the congregation. It's going to be at Kubota Gardens, which is a historic Japanese garden in Seattle. And if you are in Seattle at the end of May, which is a beautiful time to come to Seattle, please come see it. It's going to be fantastic.
How about a round of applause for all of our visiting artists? Thank you again to Mary for joining us and framing. Yes. I would be remiss not to also thank and acknowledge on NCCAkron's behalf, certainly our local funders, the Ohio Arts Council, the GAR Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, then John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, but especially in these times and moments, this lab this year would not have been possible without lead support from the National Endowment for the Arts and the dance program. And we are so grateful to continue doing this work with that. Have a good night.